Hello, and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Tonight we'll be discussing Silence by Shusaku Endo and translated by William Johnston. Before we get all into that, you can find us at all of the locations. We are One Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or come join our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time and find all our videos over on YouTube. And don't forget to check out our sweet, sweet merch at our Redbubble store. I am Shanine, and with me, I have Cameron.
Hello, hello.
All right. So, Shusaku Endo.
I feel like "all right,
Yeah.
so" is the perfect lead into this book. Sorry, keep going.
I feel like we are coming at this from very different experiences, and I am excited and nervous. But Shusaku Endo was Japanese and a practicing Catholic, so was able to write from this unique perspective. He experienced racial abuse and also suffered a serious illness, causing him to undergo a crisis of faith, but a pilgrimage restored his faith. Silence is the story of a Portuguese priest in Japan in 1643 during a time when Christianity was outlawed and oppressed. Father Rodriguez is betrayed and captured. Authorities insist he deny his faith or they will continue to torture and kill Japanese Christians. He undergoes a slow wearing down and struggles with his faith and God's silence in the face of so much suffering. What are your first impressions, Cameron?
So, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you? Like, this book is just like big sad. And, like, it's very well written, but there's there's nothing that got me excited about this book. Because it was just so sad. Now, like, I knew that going in as a book about people being persecuted for their faith, but like, it was like, yeah, it just like, there was no like happy climactic moment. It was just, oh, look, things aren't as bad right now. Oh, look, they're worse. And yeah, like, it was just one of those books that I like walked away from like every time I was like taking a break from reading. I was just like, I don't feel happy about any of this. Like, I'm just super sad all the time.
All right. So I feel like this is your 7 and my 4 really showing here because I'm like, yes, it was so sad. Wasn't it great? it I cry in like movies and TV shows all the time, but it takes a lot for a book to make me cry. And I teared up reading this at work. So it it got me. And yeah, it was big sad. And
Yeah.
it did not have the typical like Christian fiction happy ending.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So
It did not.
but yeah, it dealt with a lot of heavy topics, obviously, and I think it was some really interesting discussion about those things
Mm-hmm.
that I am excited to discuss with you. Um, so for starters, an easy question: how does this compare to our previous Christian historical fiction read?
I mean, I think calling The Robe historical fiction is possibly an insult to history. Um, but um, there was definitely a moment in this book that I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. That it was just like, there's no way people actually acted this way towards each other. And it's like, oh, yeah, they 100% did. Um, And like I think that's for what was kind of brought in from the author's history. I think that that was something that is so insightful versus when we read The Robe, where The Robe is about this very like Americanized view of Rome, and this very Christianized view of the Roman faith. Uh, that then you get this side of it, and you very much get like the dirty side of Christianity. And I loved that. I loved that it was like way more complex than what we read when we read The Robe.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Even just for, yeah, being grounded in the setting, like having a feel like he was like Midwest author writing about ancient Rome, and
Mm-hmm.
he has no real life context for that at all.
Right.
Whereas this coming from a Japanese author had obviously a lot of Japanese
Mm-hmm.
cultural experience.
Yeah. There were definitely moments in this that I was like, you cannot say that about the Japanese people. Like, we'll get into this a bit more with the other characters, but like they are like there are like specific things that get said. It's like that's was not okay to say when this was written. But it's like, oh, but it's written by someone who is Japanese talking about how people viewed his culture. Well, like there it felt like there's actually that real like obviously he wasn't alive in the 1600s, but like there was actually that real side of it of coming to it as their own culture and their own meld of two cultures that I thought was very insightful.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think also in comparison to the Robe, I like enjoyed reading this one a bit more. Didn't feel like a big slog,
The Robe was definitely falls into the category of books that were 1/3 too long, at least.
at least.
In terms of my breakdown of book club books, which I've meant to add as a tier list thing. I want to go through and do my Cameron's books that were 30% too or 33% too long, or Cameron's books that were 33% too short, and actually go through and break that out. So at some point I'll do that and put that up. Uh, but yeah, I kind of as a question off of this, and I don't know, maybe this is even jumping to um, a future question or like a final thoughts kind of thing. But and maybe this is again us coming at it from our very different personality types. If you were going to recommend Silence or The Robe to people, which one would you recommend?
Hands down.
Sorry, which one? The audio didn't come through for the
Oh,
beginning.
silence. Hands down.
Yeah. Like, I feel like for me, it's just like, hey, everybody, you want a downer? Or do you want this book that's like this one, like The Robe is like honestly just kind of fun. Again, is it historical? Definitely not. Like there is a Rome, there was an emperor, but like, um, but for this one, like I was thinking about that as I was having dinner tonight, like with our like book club tier list of like would you recommend this to the target audience of the book? I was like, I don't know if I would like versus The Robe that's like silly fun like but again maybe that's me just being like this was big sad and made me feel big sad and I don't like that I'm having to deal with these emotions so
That's fair. But no, I think the Robe I had a lot of issues with, like historically as well as just theologically. I was like, mm,
oh yeah definitely
no. Mm-mm.
100%
And
there.
this and silence deals with a lot of like really difficult theological things. And I don't know, maybe in not trying to give like definitive answers about it says a lot more.
We have a question coming in from chat that kind of building off of this from first time chatter learn guys. Um, First off, welcome. Also, welcome Retro Rewind. We've been chatting some, but but Learn asks, would Silence be a must read for Christian university students? Um, the I wish this is a book I would have wanted to read in college. Like I feel like I would have dreaded reading this in college, but I definitely wish I would have. And I think it would have led to some very interesting discussions. And this goes to what you were just saying, Shani. Like, the book doesn't answer any questions. Like, and that's part of why it is so much big sad. Of there's no right or wrong answers. There's not really any resolution to the story in like a meaningfully deep way. And so, but yeah, I think it would be a great read for Christian university students.
Um, hey guys, thanks for joining us. Fun to see you. Um, yeah, I agree. This would be a good read for sure. A difficult one, but a good one. And in the right class would lead to a lot of good discussion, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just they're like reading it on their own time in university, definitely have someone to discuss it with.
Yeah, yeah. This definitely falls in the category for me of like I need this book club. Like I like yeah. I need to talk through the way that I feel.
All right. Any standout moments for you?
Um, there's the moment where Rodriguez gets on the boat, like to go from one village to the next village, and it kind of deals with that first moment of if this is a trap, I'm completely caught. And I really liked that moment, like kind of like for what it foreshadows for the whole thing of like that this dealing with do you trust people even if you know they're going to hurt you, or know that there's a good chance they could hurt you. And so I liked that moment, and I liked that as like as like the last moment of joy that we get in the book kind of comes out of that situation. And so I liked that a lot, and I liked just getting to see the villages there. Um, and then when we meet Ferreria, I have no clue how you would say that.
I know
Um,
I said it Ferreira in my head,
okay,
but
that makes more sense. When we meet Ferreira the first time, I thought that was a very interesting discussion and kind of getting to see that back and forth.
I think for me, the I guess the second betrayal by Kichijiro,
Mm-hmm.
because the first one in the village is unclear who the betrayer was. It's strongly implied,
Right.
but we don't really know. And then Father Rodriguez flees and happens to meet up with Kichijiro. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? I have hope. I'm
Yeah.
rooting for you, Kichijiro.
You can do
And
it
then
this time.
just the absolute gut drop of the
Yeah.
betrayal, the Judas kiss of bringing him water. I just super we see it coming, but I still didn't want the betrayer to end up being the betrayer.
Mm-hmm.
It was like such a disappointing moment. And yeah, I agree with you about the discussions with Ferreira, just seeing like the differences between the two fathers was very interesting. Right. What are your thoughts on the character of Father Rodriguez?
Um, okay. So again, okay, so here we go. There's so much here that like as someone that like grew up, was a minister, grew up on going on mission trips, like there's so much here that's like just like the way that the missionaries are painted here is so disheartening. Like there's so much like Father Rodriguez is not a good person. Like like the way that he talks about the people in Japan that he works with, the way that like he like describes the country as a whole. It's just like it's such a cold and heartless way to be describing a place that he's trying to bring the gospel to. And like at the same time he's painted as well, he's not as bad as this other guy. Like, oh man. Yeah, so that was one of the big sads for me. Um I think he's a very interesting protagonist, or closest thing that we have, I guess, to a protagonist. Uh, and like he has a very interesting journey, um, and a very interesting like way of processing. I kind of wish we would have kept more of the letter format throughout this. I don't know how we would have kept that the whole way through, of course, but like I think that would have been very interesting if we would have kept that, because I liked that introspective look of like the character, how that what they're choosing to write, what they're choosing to share. But yeah, I do think that his persecution question is a very challenging one for a lot of people, even in situations obviously not nearly as extreme as his.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. I think he definitely acted very superior and, yeah, I guess kind of sadly the stereotype, I guess, of missionaries at that time, like bringing faith and civilization to people. Which is obviously not the case.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that his faith was very sincere, and he really did want to be able to share Jesus with others. I think he really understood the love of Christ, and yeah, then it was obviously a huge struggle for him, having had such a solid faith, to be shaken when his whole worldview is challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think the villain of the story is?
I don't know, everyone. Like, is that a valid answer? Like, I don't know. Like, there's the government. There's like the person who's like the magistrate. There's the interpreter. There's Rodriguez. There's like I mean, kind of everyone. Um, like almost retro rewind says the heart of man. You know, like um, there's just like a lot of like not great people, and like it's there's like if you think of it in the sense of like the protagonist is who you're supposed to be rooting for, Like, that's not really something that exists in this. Like, um, yeah, I don't know. Again, I guess like everyone is my answer. Like any like named character is probably the villain. Like,
There was definitely a lot of antagonistic forces. Yeah, I shockingly did not actually mark this quote down, but there was a point towards the end where Rodriguez, I believe, is talking to the magistrate, and he's like, I wasn't fighting you, I was fighting my own faith. And does that make Rodriguez the villain then? I'm assuming faith is not the villain.
right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of logic there. Like, if faith is supposed to be what is good and he's fighting faith, then
But as far as antagonists go, what are your thoughts on Kichijiro?
oh man, Kichijiro just needs a hug. Like,
Yes.
maybe like a slap across the face. But like I really felt for Kichijiro as we go, and like you kind of see a person that is like, and he's the Judas figure of the book. Like that's, or at least for from Rodriguez's perspective. Um, and you see this person that like wants to believe, that wants to have faith, but as he kind of constantly says throughout the book, like there are strong people in the world and weak people, and like the weak people can't survive during persecution. And so like, yeah, I think that that's such, I mean, I'm going to say like a realistic view about how most people's faith is, including mine. Like, it's easy to have faith when it's easy, and it's hard to have like serious faith, not just like I'm a Christian faith, when you're facing hardships, let alone what the people in Japan were going through. And so, um, yeah, you can, I definitely like sympathized with Kichijiro probably more than any of the other characters in the book. But yeah, he needs a hug.
Yes. I found him so annoying, probably for the fact that he's just too real. Um, I don't know. He always ended up being the betrayer
Yep.
multiple times. And I always thought he was going
You
to
all,
be
it's always
better.
like this is the time that he will get it. Nope.
No. But like he also kept coming back for confession and
Mm-hmm.
penance. And I'm like, what do you want? And I'm like, well, maybe that's just a real life journey of faith, I
Yeah.
guess. Like, I think, I don't know, I was impressed by how Rodriguez never really hated Kichijiro. He was also irritated by him at times,
Mm-hmm.
but I think also understood him, probably pitied him,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Probably had a bit of superiority complex towards Kichijiro. I probably, definitely.
100%. Like the amount of times he described him as servile
Yeah.
was like every time we saw him, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, poor Kichijiro. Final thoughts on Kichijiro. He just needed a hug. All right. What are your thoughts on Father Ferreira?
I love that he's kind of presented as like almost like the final boss. Like if we think of it as as like a video game, of it's like he's the one that's like we've heard about him. Like Rodriguez is literally coming to this place to find out what happened to him, and like surely he is not an apostate. It must be something else. Nope, he's there. Like, and I loved that we got to see these moments where he showed up. Um, like I loved that we got to go to his house and kind of interact with him there, and then when he shows back up at the torture scene, and almost acts as like the devil on Rodriguez's shoulder. Um, I thought that was a very interesting and was a very well done character. Probably also needs a hug. You know, while we're at it, hugs all around. Because as discussed, this book is big sad, and so I feel like everyone just needs a hug. But yeah, I really liked like Father Fiera. Um, Lots of hardship, lots of pain in their life as well, and very much seeing them as almost like Father Fiera and Kichijiro almost as like inverses of each other, of like or two sides of the same coin. Maybe that's a better way to say that. Of like they are both people trying to survive the best they can, and they both like come at it from very different situations because of their upbringing. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting foil.
I think I was comparing him to Rodriguez a lot while I was reading, and he seems so much colder,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And I suppose that could be like a defense mechanism. He definitely came across as ashamed as
Mm-hmm.
well, and just obviously afraid of being judged for his decisions. And I don't know, could also just be that he is a bit more removed from the initial choice of apostasy from Rodriguez, and just having, I don't even know how long it was said to have been
I don't remember.
between, but yeah, however long it was.
Yeah, because probably at least a year, right? Because there's the whole because that's like the motivating factor for Rodriguez to go, and then it's like a several month journey to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So probably give or take 8 months,
Yeah.
a year, something like that.
So yeah, just having had more time to, I don't know, kind of come to terms with his decision, or time to really regret it,
Mm-hmm.
either way, and time living with the consequences of it as well. Because yeah, they, all of the government officials and things, they keep saying like it's just a formality, like
Right.
we don't care what you believe in your heart, like it's just a formality, just the
Mm-hmm.
outward stuff. But then they go on to make them like write books disproving
Right.
Christianity, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, it's just a formality that we're gonna hold over your head for the rest of your life. Like,
So yeah, I feel like I had a bit of judgment in my heart for Father Ferreira, and now
yeah,
discussing it, I'm like, nah, that did make sense why he's the way he is.
yeah. But I mean, I feel like kind of lends to him being very well written. Like from like, and for the relatively little amount of time that he's on that he's like in the book. I feel like he's very well written. That like that he does have that like he has that bane, and you can very much understand why he did what he did, which is something that that I was happy about reading through it. It's like it felt like that was a reasonable decision. This wasn't just the I was being persecuted, so I apostatized. It felt like it was actually like a meaningful thing for him, and so yeah, again, needs a hug.
I have a quote. And like the sea, God was silent. His silence continued. From the deepest core of my being, yet another voice made itself heard in a whisper. Supposing God does not exist. So, obviously, based off the title, silence is a major theme throughout the novel. Um, what did you take away being said about silence?
I think for me, a lot of the ways that I thought about it is like almost like the lack of something worth saying. Like there's a lot of times with I think it's Groppy. At least that's how I read it as the other missionary that comes with Rodriguez. And there's just times where they're like not talking. They're just like stuck in the hut hiding together. And it's like it's this lack of a joyous thing to discuss that I feel like is the struggle. And even kind of with Rodriguez, we get into that a bit with the idea of prayer, of the idea of like, well, like he's like, we've prayed it out up till this point, like that kind of thing. And he kind of hits that moment where it's the if prayers aren't being answered, like what do we do in the silence? And yeah, I feel like this is something that would have been interesting if there were more characters, like more actual conversations going on. And that like, because it kind of felt like, I mean, silence was a theme throughout. There's your low hanging like literary commentary from Cameron for the day. But it felt like silence was such a big theme throughout that it didn't feel special. I just felt like this is how it is versus like a big moment where there is silence here. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I almost view it the opposite way, where we have so much silence that in the end, when we finally do, I guess I'll say Rodriguez perceives God to be speaking to him, it's like a whoa, something's happening here moment. Like the
Mm-hmm.
silence has been repeated for like 200 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Then here's the voice in the painting saying to trample.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think kind of like what you were saying, like there's speaking when there's something worth being spoken. Um, but I think obviously it's a struggle throughout the silence to wonder like what if it's silent because God doesn't actually exist? Like, but to try and hold on to that faith that he's still present even if he is not speaking.
Yeah. I definitely felt that as like it's so easy, even as much as we don't want to do it, that that we think of God as the gift giver, and it's the lack of receiving gifts that is so challenging, even when those gifts are, not being persecuted. But like, yeah, I think that that's something that was very interesting to kind of, as we kind of like read through this book. Like where are the blessings? Are there any? Like, what does it look like to be trying to spread the gospel in a place that is very much struggling?
I have another quote. What emotion had filled the breast of Christ when he ordered away the man who was to betray him for 30 pieces of silver? Was it anger or resentment? Or did these words arise from love? If it was anger, then at this instant Christ excluded from salvation this man alone of all the men in the world, and then our Lord allowed one man to fall into eternal damnation. But it could not be so. Christ wanted to save even Judas. If not, he would never have made him one of his disciples. And yet, why did Christ not stop him when he began to slip from the path of righteousness? This was a problem I had not understood, even as a seminarian. Um, yeah, as we were saying earlier with Kichijiro and stuff, the theme of Judas and betrayal we find throughout the novel as well. Um, what is your theological thoughts on Judas?
So, I want to kind of couch this in something that we've discussed before, of this like Rodriguez seeing himself as the Jesus figure and Kichijiro as the Judas is also the most like superiority complex thing possible in this story. It's just like it's such a perfect like encapsulation of how Rodriguez feels about Kichijiro that he views himself like Christ in this situation. So first off, there's that. Um, Second off, I really liked like this line of thought that we get throughout the book, because there's like a handful of times that this like specific like Rodriguez has like thoughts along this of like, again, superiority complex with Kichijiro being Judas comes up quite regularly because Kichijiro betrays him like 4 times. But like, I thought that was very interesting. And this idea, there's another one elsewhere in the book. What's the whatever you're gonna do it quickly. And Rodriguez kind of connects with like that thought of like that would be nice. Like, but yeah, I thought that this is a very interesting thought process, place to be, and is a very interesting description. I also think in a lot of ways it passes the buck from these being Rodriguez's decisions. Like it very much puts it on somebody else instead of him like coming to grips that it was his choice to come here and to go through, knowing very well that this could happen. It's like, oh no, it's because I was betrayed. It's like, well, that didn't help, of course, but like at the same time, you are the one that knew the risks and knew what you were doing, and it felt like he was very often trying to pass that blame off to somebody else.
Yeah, those are excellent points. Um, I think, oh, I don't know if your copy has it, but my copy had an intro by Martin Scorsese. Um,
Uh, Mine does. I don't think I read it.
Fair enough. Um, yes, he made a movie of Silence, which I have requested from my library, which I'm excited to watch. Just side note. Um, but in the intro, Scorsese says Endo looks at the problem of Judas more directly than any other artist I know. He understood that in order for Christianity to love, to adapt itself to other cultures and historical moments, it needs not just the figure of Christ, but the figure of Judas as well. Feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm still considering exactly what that means because I feel like, I don't know, as Christians brought up in the church, obviously we do the Easter story every year, and Christ obviously being the biggest figure of that, but Judas also one to always be mentioned. Um, and it was a necessary role. And I think that, like Rodriguez, that's something that I've never fully understood either and wondered about, like why was it Judas? Why did he have to? Like what happens to him now?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there is an answer for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of like the hard questions this book deals with is the can is someone eternally condemned because of that? And so again, of course, we come at it with Kichijiro, but like we keep seeing that him trying to come back, trying to show that he still believes, as he kind of deals with his the weakness of his flesh. But
And yeah, like you were saying, Rodriguez putting himself in the Christ figure, like he definitely also has his Judas moment
mm-hmm.
in the end where he betrays Christ,
Yep.
but he has a sense of peace about it. And it's like, well, if you don't think you're condemned for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in the end of the book, very much has the like there's no priests here, but he did just listen to Kichijiro's confession like the same time. It's like, well, I see you, Rodriguez.
Another theme that comes up a lot that I was intrigued by, Rodriguez speaks about faces a lot. Um, and yeah, we'll start there. He speaks about faces a lot. Any thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, this like runs the gambit too, of like, oh, like you do have a quote in here. It's like, oh, the face of Christ. We love the face of Christ, but I hate the face of the Japanese people. It's like, dude, like, calm down, Rodriguez. Like, um, and yeah, there's definitely, especially in a book where so many of the side characters are not named. There's a lot of discussion about how people's like how their face looks, their expressions. I think it's something that's very well written, but it's very interesting that that's very much the thing that we get over and over again is that look at what people's faces look like.
Mm. And yeah, I think we do see a lot of Rodriguez's Rodriguez's superiority in his description of faces again as well. I'm pretty sure he describes Kichijiro's face as servile at some point as well. I feel like it's mostly his voice, but probably also his face. And yeah, but Now for the quote. It is a face filled with vigor and strength. I feel great love for that face. I am always fascinated by the face of Christ, just like a man fascinated by the face of his beloved. Um, he specifically calls to mind the face of Christ frequently, especially when he's suffering. Did any of these moments stand out to you?
This is one that like even like historically always felt super weird to me. Like when we were like in college when we were studying like Renaissance art and stuff like that. But this like super uniformed vision of what Christ's face looks like, that's definitely not it. Um, and like that, like I don't know, man. Um, I do think that, especially with the villain, like or like the villain's tactics being the like stomp on the picture, I thought it was a very telling and there's a very impactful like moment at the end where he's talking about the face on the picture that he had to step on, and how it was not the face of Christ that he knew. Um, and so I thought that was very interesting. It's a very interesting way to tie back that idea of like the images of art and how we carry them with us. Um, yeah, but yeah, I always thought this is one that again bigger than this book, but this is one that I always thought was really weird, and this book did not change that.
I mean, I like how it's also kind of addressed in, well, not kind of, it is addressed in this book. I have a quote. It's a bit longish, so I won't read it all, but it's saying basically that Christ's face has inspired artists for centuries, even though no one really knew,
Mm-hmm.
no one making the art knew what he looked like at all. And um, it says, no doubt his real face was more beautiful than anything they have envisaged. So acknowledging that, like,
Yeah.
no, the art is not real, it is art, but it's still a beautiful face because of who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um I think one of the moments recalling Christ's face that stood out to me was towards the end. um I will read this quote. It says, now in the darkness, that face seemed close beside him. At first it was silent, but pierced him with a glance that was filled with sorrow. And then it seemed to speak to him. When you suffer, I suffer with you. To the end, I am close to you. And yeah, just combining the themes of faces and silence and having him speak to him was just like a very powerful moment. And yeah, I think affirming that all of the moments of silence had not been him not being there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Hello, puppy.
Yep. Um, and yes, speaking of when you suffer, I suffer with you. Um, Another quote about suffering. Um, Many centuries ago, that man tasted with his dried and swollen tongue all the suffering that I now endure, he reflected. And this sense of suffering, shared softly, eased his mind and heart more than the sweetest water. Where do you find comfort amidst suffering?
I don't know. Like this is like a weird question to answer, especially after reading a book about persecution. Of like acknowledging the blessing that we have, but like I feel like oftentimes it's I'm going to use a Kingdom Hearts quote. It's like my friends are my power. Um, like oftentimes it is like spending time with those people that matter most to me. Like the relationships that have like taken years, and like that's a lot of times what um, where it is. Like that's where a lot of times where I find comfort. What about you?
Um, yes, I agree with that. Also, I'm going to give a very Shanine answer and say books. Um, I think sometimes I'm looking just for someone to be like, yeah, I've gone through that too, and it
Mm-hmm.
sucks, and I get it. And friends are a wonderful comfort, but have not always been through exactly the same things. And obviously, being a friend that is sometimes on the other side of it, it's real hard to know what to say and what to do for friends in those moments. But I don't know, just reading a book that makes you feel seen can be very comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Ferreira, um, think probably has a hard time finding comfort in the midst of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep. Big agree.
and he says prayer does nothing to alleviate suffering, um, which is rough,
Mm-hmm.
coming from a priest. Um, so, to you, what is the purpose of prayer for and to the suffering?
Yep. I mean, I think that at its core, prayer is that time to frame things with God and frame things within God's plan. That's like the Sunday school answer. Like that doesn't mean that that's easy to do or that I'm great at that by any means, but like I think that that is like at its core, the idea of prayer is to find our place in God's plan. Uh, and um, even when that's not necessarily where we want it to be, I think that is that part of prayer is that moment of of understanding that there is a bigger picture than what we can see, and that doesn't always, again, that doesn't remove the hurt, that doesn't remove the like pain of like so many people that have had prayers for like family members that have been suffering from illness or taken away too soon, like that go unanswered. Like again, that it was the Sunday school answer versus like that doesn't mean it's easy to get to, or even necessarily that it's right, but like or right in all situations. But yeah.
All right, just popped into my head now, so it may not be fully formed, but I am still going to take credit for its brilliance for sure. Is that prayer is for breaking the silence. Um, yeah, I think in suffering, it's easy to get wrapped up in the silence and maybe stop listening because you've stopped expecting to hear anything, which is understandable. Um, but I think prayer can bring you back to a place where you're willing and able to hear something.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't hear something, to acknowledge that there's somebody listening and you're not in it alone.
Mhm. I agree.
All right. What do you think of Rodriguez's final decision to ultimately trample on the face of Christ?
I think this is framed in a very interesting way of like we see so many other people's persecution be, we're going to say, more intense for lack of a better word, uh, where like Rodriguez compared to the other people does not go through that much. And I think it's a very interesting like framing of like his decision comes not from his own desire to not feel pain, but it comes from the place of seeing so many other people be tortured for what they're going through. Um, Again, I think that's a very interesting place to come through, especially as we've seen Rodriguez's superiority complex throughout the book, very much being like, I'm okay with what's going to happen to me, like suffer as Christ suffered, like that kind of thing. In the end, that's not what he had to go through. I think that's a very interesting thing. And I also think it helps to not have the author have to describe the main character being tortured, but like, um, but I do think that that was a very interesting way to frame it. And again, you get you referenced it earlier, like it's just you just got to do it for just say that you did what you actually believe. We don't care about, like, um, and it's like well, if I do this and it ends these people suffering, isn't that what Christ would want? Like, again, it's a very interesting way to approach that topic versus the normal I was persecuted for my faith kind of thing.
Yeah, I think kind of the whole time reading in the back of my mind, there's a verse that's like, if you deny me,
Mm-hmm.
I'll deny you. And it's just like, well, like, can we be forgiven for denying Christ like that? Or is that kind of like, you're done? Um, but then in those like final moments when Rodriguez is hearing Christ speak to him, saying, like, trample, I came to earth to be trampled on. That was the moment that got me. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, I think that was just like, I don't know, like a bit of a slap in the face reminder of
Mm-hmm.
like what Christ went through and what he is willing to do for his children, and just like, whoa, I don't know. I think, yeah, Rodriguez's decision to apostatize was understandable when it's your own suffering. I think you can, like, obviously, I have never been through those things, and torture is something else entirely. But in suffering, it's a lot easier to convince yourself that you can go through with the suffering, but watching other people suffer because of you is much
Yeah.
different. Um,
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's like the classic movie trope of like, no matter what you do, I will never give in. It's like, okay, cool. Well, what about if I do this thing to this other person? Whoa, whoa, whoa! I give in. Like yeah, it's so much easier when it's like the I can take this upon myself and versus the seeing that pain in other people.
mhm. Yeah. So I think his decision was understandable, and I don't think it was even that surprising.
Yeah, wasn't.
Um, I think what was surprising was just his peace about the whole thing. That not that it was a decision he was forced into, but that it was the right decision.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I spent a lot of this book wondering how they were going to get them out, and I'm very happy that that didn't happen. Of course, you know that contributes to the big sad, but but I do think it's very interesting that we actually had to see Rodriguez make the decision versus them getting to be bailed out, whether by a more direct thing from God or Jesus, or even being rescued or something like that. Uh, yeah,
Right. Is there anything else that stood out to you or any quotes you would like to share?
I have one. It's I don't know. On my book, it's page 160. Uh, it's a conversation that says, "Proud, yes, if the Japanese had come to believe in the God we taught, but in the church we built throughout this country, the Japanese were not praying to the Christian God. They twisted God to their own way of thinking in a way that we can never imagine, if you can call that God." Ferreira lowered his eyes and moved his lips as though something had occurred to him. "No, that is not God. It is like a butterfly caught in a spider's web. At first, it is certainly a butterfly, but the next day, only the externals, the wings and the trunk, but those are a butterfly. It has lost its true reality and has become a skeleton. In Japan, our God is just like that. Butterfly caught in a spider's web. Only the exterior form of God remains, but it has already become a skeleton." Uh, so I like that quote um, for the lack of like self awareness that it has, of like this assumption that their view of Christ is the correct view of Christ, and also for like what I think is like one of the primary challenges in mission work is like you're not going there to share, in my case, like American Christianity. You're going there to share Christ with where they are. And I feel like that quote is just like so emblematic of the issue of missions and the issue of the church throughout history of it's not that God is there for these people, it's that God has to be there for these people and it has to look exactly like this because this is the only way. Um, and it even gets into that a little bit in other sections of the book with them, the idea of the people that are there from the various churches or various countries like arguing and belittling each other and that kind of causing dissent, forbidding people from talking to the other ones, of the other missionaries, things like that. And like I feel like we as Christians a lot of times are our own worst enemies because of that.
Yeah, that was definitely something I was thinking about too, like how Christianity exists in different cultures and for obvious reasons. Looks different in different cultures. I don't have any profound thoughts about it. I was
Yeah.
just thinking about it.
Yeah. And I'm kind of in that same boat of it's like I don't really know where to go beyond that thought. But like that's the yeah, that was one that stood out to me, kind of thinking of missions throughout the book. That was really like the only quote from the book. Like there was several that I liked, but like that was really the only one as we were reading. I was like, oh, this is the one I need to bring up in book club. I think that's kind of ties in with how this book was written. Like I feel like a lot of times, especially modern books, are like they're trying to get the tweetable quotes, and I feel like there was not really that many of those in this comparatively, or not that many that were trying to be that. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But that was one that I was like, yes, need to share.
All right. Final thoughts.
Uh, Book is a big sad. I do think it's a good read, especially if you can read it, as we are saying at the beginning, with people that you can actually talk through it with. Um, I do feel like this is something that, had we not been doing this book club, I definitely would not have finished the book. Uh, it's just kind of so far out of the realm of like of things that I enjoy. Like I just can't really have. I couldn't really see myself going through that if it wasn't for us having a conversation about it at the end. But I do recommend it again, as long as you have people to talk about it with. Or come back here, listen to book club again.
Appreciate you, Cameron.
I did enjoy the book. Like I will say that. Like it is a good book. It is well written. It is just not the. It is not my vibe.
All right. Well, for me, book is a big sad. Um, yeah, very sad, very good. Um, Deals with faith topics in a way that I want faith topics dealt with in fiction, um, which is to say, digs in deep but doesn't give prescriptive answers. Um, Definitely recommend. Um, I've been hearing about it for ages, and it's a classic for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I'm very curious to how I'm gonna feel about this book in like 6 months. Like that is something I'm very curious if this is the type of book that is gonna stick with me. So I could definitely see it being one like the mulling over.
yep. All right. Our next book club on May 25th will be by Emma's recommendation. So sad you're not here right now, Emma. We miss you. Um, she would probably do a better job of describing what these books are than I'm about to do. But we are going to read Finn Family Moomin Troll by Tove Jansson. This is a Swedish series originally written by a Finnish author, and they are about hippopotamus esque fantasy creatures.
And now
Um,
for something completely different, which I
yes.
then the cover on Amazon says a masterpiece, says Neil Gaiman. So you know I'm in.
I'm in. That's all you need to sell me. All right. This has been Silence with First Geek 411. We are One Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come chat with us on our Discord server or shoot us an email at 1stgeek411 at gmail.com. Check out our Redbubble store, and watch live on our Twitch and find all our videos over on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at the Hoot and Howl and Instagram at Hoot and Howl Tales, Tales.
You can find me as Humar Whittle.
Read a book.